Hello and welcome to Retro 48K for another retro review. This time it's Syndicate Wars on the Sony PlayStation and PC. Now this is one of my all-time favourite games, so it's really surprising to me that it's not talked about much when people talk about the top 10 games of all time and things like that, because this is an absolute classic from the late 90s for me. And I'm going to change all this, hopefully, by spending the next 10 minutes explaining to you why you need this game in your collection, and you should at least attempt to play this game, because it's still available today on things like COG and Steam. But first up, before all that, what is Syndicate Wars? Well, it was originally released in 1996 for the PC and in 1997 on the PlayStation. In fact, there was even a Saturn version in the works, but it seems that EA didn't see the Saturn market as big enough to be worth it by late 1997, so that version was canned. It's actually a sequel to the original Syndicate, created by Bullfrog, and since it was Bullfrog, most people tend to give credit to the game to Peter Molyneux, but he really only produced the first game. Most of the credit for its sequel should go to Mike Diskett, I think that's how you pronounce his name, and his team, and they really did an amazing job on this one, but I'll get back to those guys later. Like the first game in the series, Syndicate Wars is a real-time tactics game in which you play as a high-ranking officer in an organisation, carrying out various missions in which you control a squad of 4 agents. And these missions grow increasingly more complex as the games go on. Initially, you start off just placed in a small map with your 4 agents, and you'll maybe have to eliminate a rival scientist or kill a businessman or something like that. But later on, you'll be defending banks, quelling riots, and doing multiple objectives in the levels. Plot-wise, the game is best described as kind of just having one. Being set 95 years after the first game in the late 21st century, it sees you play as either the Eurocorp Syndicate as its attempts to hold on to its power base that was established in the first game, or the new guys on the block, the Church of the New Epoch, and their own rise to power. But the plot is mainly told through mission briefs, which I have to admit, when I first played this back in my teens, I didn't really read. I'd simply check them for the objectives and then start the mission to get in with it. But where Syndicate really starts to stand out is its approach to world building and the details which are given through the manual and mission briefs. If you bother to actually read them, it exposes this really rich dystopian world where ordinary people are mind-controlled corporate slaves, unaware of the world around them thanks to cybernetic implants which can actually control what you see and hear. It's really like, imagine Blade Runner crossed with 1984, and you kind of sit there in the ballpark of what the story and the world is about. And this kind of links back to gameplay nicely too, as you have tools within your arsenal that allow you to take control of ordinary people and use them as cannon fodder on missions, and they'll even pick up fallen weapons and join you in the shooting. And this leads to my favourite part of the game, which is how open-ended it is, especially for a game from 1996. As I mentioned earlier, each mission kind of drops you in the map with your 4 agents, and it's up to you to figure out what you need to do. There'll be a mini-map with a location flashing on it, and it's up to you to decide how to tackle that particular objective. So you might choose to do a drive-by shooting, or you might choose to drive up, drop a bomb, and then get out of there. Or you might do what is my favourite tactic, go and kill a load of cops, get a lot of civilians, they pick up the guns, and then just charge in with an army of 20 or 30 people just blowing the hell out of stuff. There's loads of options here that suit your playstyle. You might even choose a sniper rifle and pick enemies off from afar with fallback tactics. And this works in the pre-missions too as well, so before each mission you get a chance to equip various weapons for your agents. Each agent can have their own loadout, and you can even equip cybernetics to them as well to enhance their speed and durability. Now you only have so many agents from the beginning, around 8, and if you get too far into the game, you do continuous missions where you only finish with 1 or 2 or 3 agents. You're eventually going to run out of those agents when you get to the later levels, so there's a nice balance of lives and gameplay there. And the weapons themselves are quite nicely balanced. This game is all about going in with the right loadout, and there's very few weapons that you will just discard and never use again. The only real weapon that I think is kind of pointless is the Uzi, because as soon as you get the minigun you don't need it. But all the other weapons have their own strengths and weaknesses. The long range rifle is really high damage, but it takes an age to reload, so if you equip all your agents with that, yes, you can take down one really powerful enemy really quickly, but a mob of them will just swamp you because you won't be able to reload in time. The lasers have quite a powerful initial shot and can keep firing, but it gets weaker and things like that. There's a really nice balance to the weapons, and you've really got to try them out and see which style suits your own. And just add another layer of complexity on this as well. On the PlayStation version, new items that you can equip and new cybernetics are unlocked just as you progress through the game, but the PC has a nice option of you being able to manually research different items, which can lead to a bit more tactics in there in terms of where you can go for the lasers or setting traps and things first before you go for the big heavy duty weapons. It's a nice balance. And you can also pick up extra weapons that the enemies have in missions and then sell them at the end of the next level to get more money. And you can rob banks in the game as well by blowing them up and gathering up the resources, so that again you've got more money for cybernetic parts and to really enhance your agents. From a technical standpoint, graphically, the game does look a bit dated now thanks to its mix of 3D and sprites, but I think the art style's strong enough to really carry it a long way, and the move to 3D for this version really helps it. I always struggled with that first game because it was isometric, it wasn't fully 3D, so when you move behind buildings it was difficult to get agents to move. But this uses the same 3D engine as Magic Carpet, so you can now rotate the camera 360 and figure out where your agents are. You can still sometimes get stuck, but it's generally your fault if you do. They also improved the AI on this one as well, so enemies now don't just attack you individually. They're aware of the other guys attacking you, so you can get ganged up on, and it works really well and makes fights a lot more interesting. If I had to pick one issue with the game though, it's its controls on the PlayStation version. They're quite fiddly because you can have control of all 4 agents at once, or just 2 agents or 1 agent, and you can send one to one area of the map and one to the other, and you can move around the map individually as well as moving your agents. And you've only got a D-pad because this was pre DualShock. It can get quite fiddly as you have to hold L1 and press square and things to pick stuff up. It is workable. You do get used to it after about half an hour of playtime, but it does mean that at least your initial half hour you're gonna be struggling to remember the controls. So it's not really a pick up and play game that likes of Ridge Racer and beat 'em ups are, because you've got to get back into the groove, as it were. But if you play a long session, then it's not going to bother you. That's the only minor gripe I have really with it. But where I think this game stands head and shoulders above everything else is the atmosphere. Now, I often talk about atmosphere in games mainly because that's what draws me into the experience more than most aspects of a game, or in some cases what draws me out of that experience. And in Syndicate Wars, they really went the extra mile. Not only is the soundtrack absolutely amazing, I mean, the clip I used for the intro still gives me chills today. Just remember, all those memories come flooding back. The way you hear the police announcements and things like that while you're playing the level, of them telling you to move on or step this way and things like that. Or even just things like they've got billboards in the levels that are showing clips from Judge Dredd or for Bullfrog adverts, or even Ghost in the Shell, as that was a brand new anime released at the time. It all just adds to this world that they build, which is just phenomenally fun to be in and play. I think one of the reasons Syndicate Wars probably isn't talked about as well as games like Command and Conquer and other real-time strategies, even though this is kind of a bit different because it's real-time tactics, is mainly because it doesn't look as exciting on the screen, because it's focused on just a 4-man squad. Even though you've got big explosions going off and things like that, and you'll notice from this footage, the footage doesn't really convey the sense of excitement and the thrill you get in the battles. It can look quite plain, but when you've got that much to cope with, and you're switching between items and you're managing agents' shields and things like that, the action gets really fast and exciting that way. It's maybe not as much going on screen as a battle on Command and Conquer where you've got hundreds of units because you've only got 4 guys here. but there's just as much damage and there's just as much thrill when you do win. So don't be dismayed by the screen, by the images and the screen. You've really got to give this one a go yourself. Which kind of brings me to the end. I hope I've convinced you in this review to give the game a go. It is a truly underrated classic for me, this one. Well worth your time. But what do you guys think? Did you play it in the past? Have I convinced you to check it out? I'd love to hear back from you in the comments. And let's have a discussion about Syndicate Wars, because it deserves more love. As always, I've been Retro48K, and I'll see you next time.